and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene and today I'm going to be sharing with you all of the books I bought or received in the second quarter of the year. So there are a few books here that I was gifted by someone else, but I will be honest, I am mostly at fault for most of these books. I mentioned in a couple previous videos that I went on vacation the first week of June, and I may or may not have done some book shopping while I was there. Not all of these books I bought were from that vacation. I did buy quite a few books before I even went on vacation, and then I bought quite a few while I was on vacation. So I'm going to start with the books that I was gifted. Then I have a couple books I got at a library book sale. I have books from thrift stores or secondhand bookstores. I have a few books from an independent bookstore, and then books from Amazon and books from Barnes & Noble. So this video is probably going to take a while, so let's just get into the books. Okay, so like I said, the first books are books that were given to me by somebody else. The first one, my brother found online at a really good price. It was like $2 or $3 for the book. So he offered to buy me a copy, and I said, sure, I'll take it. I'll give it a try for $2 or $3. And that one is The Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth, who is the author of the Divergent series. Honestly, I've never read anything by her other than the Divergent series. And this is an adult novel, not a young adult novel. So I have no idea what I'm going to think about this one, but it does sound really interesting. It's about a group of teens who were basically the chosen ones when there was a person known as the Dark One. It says his weapon of choice was catastrophic events known as drains, leveled cities and claimed thousands of lives. So they were the chosen ones to get rid of him, and they did. But this book takes place 10 years later when they are big celebrities, but also, is it 10 years later or is it later than that? Yes, 10 years later. They're big celebrities, but the younger generation is kind of forgetting about what life was like when the Dark One was around. There's just different views on it at this point in time. But then on the 10th anniversary of the Dark One's defeat, something unthinkable happens. One of the chosen ones dies. When the others gather for the funeral, they discover the Dark One's ultimate goal was much bigger than they, the government, or even prophecy could have foretold. And it also sounds like the Dark One may not actually be gone for good. So it sounds like it could be really good. We'll see. I haven't heard very many people talking about this one, so I don't know what the general consensus on this book is. But I'm hoping I enjoy it. One of the things that I want to do when I do these book hauls is read, for the most part, it won't be with all books, but for the most part, I just want to read the first paragraph of the book. Maybe. This book is laid out weird. There we go. I want to read the first paragraph of chapter 1. So that way it kind of gives you guys an idea of whether or not the writing sounds like something you might enjoy, whether the first paragraph hooks you or not, things like that. The drain looked the same every time, with all the people screaming as they ran away from the giant dark cloud of chaos, but never running fast enough. Getting swept up, their skin pulling away from bone while they were still alive to feel it, blood bursting from them like swatted mosquitoes. Oh God. That one got kind of graphic. Sorry. I will put a warning before I read that. All right, the rest of the books I have are ones that my brother and sister-in-law had, but they were duplicates. So I don't know if these are, we both owned them before we got married and now they're duplicates, or we bought them and didn't realize we already had them. But the first are a set of books that are part of the Discworld series. And I know I looked this up once. I don't have it written down anymore. But I believe this is the order they were published in. I don't know that for sure. I do know Reaper Man is the first one chronologically in these books. This is the second book in the Death series, which I have already read. And then we have Lords and Ladies, and I don't remember which series this is part of. Then Soul Music, which is the third book in the Death series. Then The Truth, which I think this one is the second book in the Industrial Revolution series. And then Night Watch, which I want to say is part of the Watch series. I'm assuming, I don't remember now, and I don't remember which number in the series it is. I will put them on the screen for you guys because I know I have it written down somewhere, but I'm not finding it right now, so I don't have that in front of me. But these are all in the Discworld series, parts of 3 or 4 different sub-series, and I've only read one of them, but I now have them for whenever I want to get to them. And I will be reading Soul Music later this year, so I will get to at least one of them. Reaper Man, I can read the first paragraph of, potentially. Yeah, I can read that because it's one sentence and it doesn't give anything away. The other books I won't, because since I haven't read them, I don't know if they're spoilery or not. And I'm not going to try to figure out if Soul Music is or not. So, first paragraph, like I said, it's actually one sentence in Reaper Man. The Morris dance is common to all inhabited worlds in the multiverse. I'll go ahead and read the second paragraph since that was so short. It is danced under blue skies to celebrate the quickening of the soil and under bare stars because it's springtime and with any luck the carbon dioxide will unfreeze again. The imperative is felt by deep-sea beings who have never seen the sun and urban humans whose only connection with the cycles of nature is that their Volvo once ran over a sheep. So, yeah, good old Terry Pratchett humor there. All right, and then the last book that was given to me is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles series, which I have not read yet, but I keep thinking about it. I keep wanting to pick it up, but it never ends up being a higher priority. So maybe now that I own it, it'll be a little higher priority. And all I really know about this series is the books are fairy tale retellings, but it takes place, I don't know if it's supposed to be futuristic or just takes place on a different world, but the first book is a Cinderella retelling, but Cinderella is a cyborg. And I believe there's also a plague in this book, but that's really all I know. And I don't know why I'm slouching, I'm sorry. So, the first paragraph of chapter 1. The screw through Cinder's ankle had rusted, the engraved cross marks worn to a mangled circle. Her knuckles ached from forcing the screwdriver into the joint as she struggled to loosen the screw, one gritting twist after another. By the time it was extracted far enough for her to wrench free with her prosthetic steel hand, the hairline threads had been stripped clean. Strip screws are never fun. I guarantee they're not when you're a cyborg either. So the next 2 books I got at a library book sale. One I bought for me and one I actually bought for my brother and sister-in-law and then found out they already own it. So the one that I bought for me is Legend by Marie Lu. This is the first book in the Legend trilogy, which is another series that I've wanted to pick up and just haven't. So it's not in the best shape. It does have tape around it. It has writing on the sides. It's not in the best shape, like I said, but I figure if it's in my house, I'm more likely to actually pick it up. So I went ahead and got it. I can always replace it later if I want to, but I at least want to give this a try because I really liked The Kingdom of Back by her. This one, I don't know anything about, to be honest. I do remember reading that the main character is part of the elite class and there's another major character who is part of the lower class. And somehow I think he gets blamed for a murder, but beyond that, I don't remember anything, any of the details about the book. Okay, this one I'm going to read the first 2 paragraphs because they're both one sentence each. My mother thinks I'm dead. Obviously, I'm not dead, but it's safer for her to think so. There you go. All right, and then the second book actually goes with Cinder. It's Stars Above by Marissa Meyer, which is I believe it's a short story collection that takes place after the events of the Lunar Chronicles. So I'm not going to read the first paragraph in this one because I have no clue if it's going to be spoilery for the previous books. But yeah, I bought this one for my brother and sister-in-law because they were reading the Lunar Chronicles and I thought, I found a book that goes with that. You guys can have it. And then found out they already own it. So now it's mine. All right, the next few books are mostly classics, and I found these at a secondhand bookstore. The first one is Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson, which apparently is the first book in the David Balfour series. I didn't know he wrote a series, but now I do. All I really know about this one is David Balfour is a boy who gets kidnapped, but then he is rescued by a man who lives in the Scottish Highlands, and he takes him back there. and the story mostly takes place in that part of the country. Beyond that, I really don't know anything, and that's really not even that much to know. But I do have a copy of the Disney movie version of this from the 70s. But I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie. So I finally found a copy and picked it up. Again, it's not the greatest copy. This dark spot down at the bottom here, it actually says Walmart 2 for $1. And somebody tried to mark it out because they didn't like the printed on sticker, I guess. So now it's just a big black spot on the book. But I figured to read the book and see if I like it. I'm okay with going ahead and getting a used copy, and then if I like it, I can buy a better copy later. Okay, let's get the foreword. All right, so first paragraph. This one's a little bit longer, so I won't have to add extra paragraphs. Chapter 1 is called I Set Off Upon My Journey to the House of Shaws. I will begin the story of my adventures with a certain morning early in the month of June, the year of grace 1751, when I took the key for the last time out of the door of my father's house. The sun began to shine upon the summit of the hills as I went down the road, and by the time I had come as far as the manse, the blackbirds were whistling in the garden lilacs, and the mist that hung around the valley in the time of the dawn was beginning to arise and die away. Very literary beginning. Not surprising, but all right. The next two I'm also not going to read first paragraphs from because they are collections of poetry. But the first one you will have seen in my June wrap-up, and that is Evangeline and Selected Tales and Poems by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I've obviously already read this one and tabbed it, but I hadn't read more than one or two poems by Longfellow in the past. And I did like the ones I had read, but I wanted to read more by him. And actually, now that I think about it, I got these mixed up. This book and the other book of poetry, I did not get at a secondhand bookstore. I got these at a little free library. Apparently, I forgot that when I was putting these together. But I did really enjoy the poems in this one. And then the other book of poetry I got is The Prelude, Selected Poems and Sonnets by William Wordsworth. I took a romantic English literature class in college, and so I read quite a few of his poems. But I know there's plenty that I haven't read, and so when I saw this one in the little free library, I figured I can pick it up, it's free, and I can read more of his poetry and see what I think about them, because I have enjoyed what I've read so far. All right, now we're back to the secondhand bookstore. So the next one I got is The Aeneid by Virgil. And there's a story behind me getting this book. So I originally bought the Aeneid, I believe from Barnes & Noble 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't know what happened with the particular edition that I got, but for some odd reason, the middle 40 pages of the book were missing. And not just the book went from like page 40 to page 80. It did, but those middle 40 pages that were missing, they stuck in the last 40 pages of the book. And then you read from like page 80 to the end, and you still have the last 40 pages of the book in there again. So it makes me think that somewhere out there, there's an edition that has all but the last 40 pages of the book, and the last 40 pages are just the middle 40 in the book. I have no idea what happened, but unfortunately, it meant I couldn't finish reading the Aeneid because I didn't have the whole poem. So I eventually got rid of that book because by the time I picked it up, I was past the return date at Barnes & Noble by a long shot, so I couldn't just return it. So I just got rid of that book, and then I found this one at a secondhand bookstore, and I thought, you know what, I'll just go ahead and buy this one. I can try to read it again, and if it doesn't work out, at least it was cheap this time. And if I really enjoy it, I can buy a better copy later, but at least this way I can actually read it, I hope. There are a lot of dog-eared pages on this book, I noticed when I was in the store, but it's a used copy. I just wanted to be able to read the book, so I'm not that worried about it. I guess I could try to read the first part of this. I don't know how much I'm going to read because this is an epic poem, not a book. And I have to actually find the book. Oh. Okay, I didn't notice this in the store. It's written in prose form. It's not written in poetic form, verse form. So, that's one thing I try to do with epic poems, is I try to actually find copies that are in verse form. So, Book 1, Storm and Banquet. I sing of arms and of the man, fated to be an exile, who long since left the land of Troy and came to Italy, to the shores of Lavinium. And a great pounding he took by land and sea at the hands of the heavenly gods because of the fierce and unforgetting anger of Juno. Great too were his sufferings in war before he could found his city and carry his gods to Latium. This was the beginning of the Latin race, the Alban fathers and the high walls of Rome. Tell me, Muse, the causes of her anger. How did he violate the will of the queen of the gods? What was his offense? Why did she drive a man famous for his piety to such endless hardship and such suffering? Can there be so much anger in the hearts of the heavenly gods? So, like most epic poems, it begins with basically the chorus that's saying, this is what the poem's about. So, I'm not sure how I'm going to like the fact that it's not in verse, but we will see. All right, then the last book I bought, I'm pretty sure is not a classic, but I don't remember what year it was published. But that is Arthur Rex by Thomas Berger. And I could tell by the title, this is a King Arthur story. So I decided to go ahead and get it, even though I know nothing about it. But from what research I did on it, it sounds like he takes the story of King Arthur and kind of does some new stuff with it, adds in some humor to it and things like that. So it sounds like it could be really good. And I believe it's a standalone novel, so it's not part of a series or anything. So I'm hoping I really like this one. I have not read the first paragraph of this. I haven't read the first paragraph in any of these prior to doing it here on camera. So, Book 1 of Uther Pendragon and the Fair Igraine, I never remember how to say her name, and how Arthur was born. Now Uther Pendragon, king of all Britain, conceived an inordinate passion for the fair Igraine, Duchess of Cornwall, and having otherwise no access to her, he proceeded to wage war upon her husband Gorloris the Duke. I don't know how to say these names. I'm sorry. I swear I've heard, is it Igraine or Yigraine? I can't remember if there's a Y sound in there or not. It's been too long since I've heard the name, and I cannot remember her husband's name whatsoever. So I apologize for most likely butchering those names. I like Arthurian legend, but unfortunately I've read more than I've listened to. All right, the next two books I got at Half Price Books, and the first one should come as no surprise. You guys have probably seen me talk about this already, but it is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I do still need to get to it. I still haven't started it, but I'm filming this video a little early, so I still have time to get to it by the end of August. But the only thing I really know about this book is that it is a retelling, essentially, of the story of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel from Genesis. And in the book, Adam and his family move from the East Coast to California. He has twin boys named Cal and Aaron, and one of them does really well and one of them does not, for one reason or another. So I've heard nothing but good things about this book, so I'm hoping to enjoy it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Let's see if I can find chapter 1. And this one has no fancy title or anything. The Salinas Valley is in Northern California. It is a long, narrow swale between two ranges of mountains, and the Salinas River winds and twists up the center until it falls at last into Monterey Bay. So that's that one. And then the other book that I got at Half Price Books is by an author I own 2 other books from, but I haven't read any of them, but I couldn't pass this one up. It's When Christ and His Saints Slept by Sharon K. Penman. This is a historical fiction novel, and it takes place in 1135 AD, after the death of King Henry I in England. And apparently after King Henry died, his daughter Maud, I think is her name, yes. His daughter Maud was supposed to assume the throne, but her cousin Stephen stole it from her. And apparently there was a bitter, bloody feud between the two of them over the throne. So there's a lot about English history that I don't know. And so when I find books like this that have to do with the monarchy, I'm always intrigued to pick them up and find out more about it. So I went ahead and picked this up, even though I've never read a Sharon K. Penman book. But I own 2 other books by her in the Justin De Quincey series and haven't read them. Hopefully I'll get to one of her books at some point. Barfleur Normandy, November 1120. The ship strained at its moorings, like a horse eager to run. Barold stopped so abruptly that he almost collided with a passing sailor, for in all of his 16 years he'd never seen a sight so entrancing. The Aznique seemed huge to him, at least 80 feet long, with a towering mast and a square sail striped in vertical bands of yellow and scarlet. The hull was as sleek as a swan and just as white, and brightly painted shields hung over the gunwales, protecting the oarsmen from flying spray. Above the mast flew several streaming pennants and a silver and red banner of St. George. The harbor resembled a floating forest. So many masts were swaying and bobbing on the rising tide. More than 20 ships were taking on cargo and passengers for the royal fleet of the English King Henry, first of that name since the conquest, was making ready to sail. But Barold had eyes only for the white ship. The next 3 books I got at an independent bookstore. Okay, the first one was picked up for me from that store, but I did pay for it. So I technically purchased this. It was not gifted to me, but that is Enchanted Hill by Emily Bain Murphy. I did mention this one in my mid-year freakout tag because I do really like the cover of this book. From what I understand about this book, I need to look at the years. I want to say it's 1930. I wanted to say it was 1930s. It's apparently specifically 1930. This takes place in Hollywood, and the main character, Cora, is an aspiring private investigator, and she gets herself a job at this estate of an elite Hollywood magnate. She's working to try to uncover some information, but then someone from her past shows up, and he's undercover too, and the fact that they know each other could blow each other's covers. So they agree to not tell who the other person is until they can complete what they're there to do. But it sounds like she's also going to do some digging on him as well. So it sounds interesting. It takes place during the golden age of Hollywood. So really intrigued to get to this one. Actually, I don't know if it's old Hollywood glamour, so maybe not the golden age, because this might still be silent film era. But yeah, interested to get to this one. I just realized I didn't actually read the first paragraph of Enchanted Hill, did I? Oh yeah, this is also a signed copy. That was the main reason it got picked up for me. That way, in case it was gone by the time I came down to visit. All right, so chapter 1 of Enchanted Hill. This is a long paragraph. I might read like half this paragraph, we'll see. Long before Cora ever stepped foot onto Enchanted Hill, she knew it like the back of her hand. She had pored over the blueprints of Bird Castle in her small, leaking New York City apartment 6 months earlier, the light flickering above her head, the winter draft slicing through the soft, rotting wood of the windowsill. She had pulled her sweater around her shoulders and committed to memory the intricate honeycomb of passages, gardens, citrus orchards, glass-tiled pools, and guest houses. 85 rooms in the main house alone, set among mazes of boxed hedges and fountain hewn from white marble. It's a really long paragraph. And then the other 2 I personally picked up in this store. And the first one is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse S. Sutanto. And this one I'm planning to get to this fall. And since I saw it at the bookstore, I thought I might as well go ahead and pick it up, so this way I have my own physical copy of it. Again, this is one I don't know a lot about, other than Vera Wong is a 60-year-old Chinese lady, and she wakes up one morning to find a dead body in her tea shop. And then she starts doing her own investigation because she thinks she can do a better job than the police. And that's really all I know. Okay, so the first paragraph is from Vera's perspective. Vera Wong Juju? I'm going to assume that's how to say her last name. Vera Wong Juju, age 60, is a pig, but she really should have been born a rooster. We are, of course, referring to Chinese horoscopes. Vera Wong is a human woman, thank you very much, but roosters have nothing on her. Every morning at exactly 4:30, Vera's eyelids snap open like roller shades shooting up. Then the upper half of her body levitates from the mattress. No lazy rolling out of bed for Vera, though admittedly sitting up in bed now comes with about half a dozen clicks and clacks of her joints. She swings her fuzzy-socked feet out with gusto and immediately finds the slippers she placed next to her bed with military precision the night before. She takes a quick moment to send a text to her son, reminding him that he's sleeping his life away and should have been up and at it before her. He is, after all, a young man with a whole world to conquer. Late mornings, Vera believes, are only for toddlers and Europeans. All right, then. So that one sounds like fun. And then the last book that I picked up at this store is one I've already read, and that is Lunar New Year Love Story by Jean Luen Yang. I read this book in February, which is also the month it came out, and I really enjoyed this book, but I wanted my own copy so I can reread it in the future, so I went ahead and picked it up since it was there. And this is a graphic novel, so I can't really read, I don't know if I can really read anything out of this. Oh, this one's signed too. I did not know that. Okay, so I'm just going to read the first page of this because it's really short. He gave me until next Valentine's Day, 1 year, and I've already messed it all up. So there you go. Oh, I didn't actually talk about what this book was about, did I? It follows a girl named Valentina who is obsessed with Valentine's Day. But around Valentine's Day 1 year, she learns that her family is cursed in love. They're doomed to be unlucky in love. And so Saint Valentine offers to take her heart in order to protect her from being hurt by love, but it also means that she would be numb to it. And so Valentina, kind of concerned with that, makes a deal with him that she will have a year in which to find love, or she will give him her heart. And there's more to the story than that. And also, yes, she is a teenager. She's in high school in the story. I personally really liked how the story ended. And that's all I'm going to say, because I'm not going to give spoilers away for this. But I really enjoyed this book. All right. I think we're down to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sorry if the camera moved. I kind of shook it a little bit there. So the first book that I got from Amazon, I actually got back in, I technically got this back in March. I ordered it in March, but it didn't get here until about mid-April because apparently it got lost in the mail and they had to send a new copy. So it was not on my bookshelf tour, so I'm covering it here. But that is Prelude to Foundation by Isaac Asimov, which is the first of the two books that take place before the Foundation trilogy. I have already read this book and I really liked it. And also reading this book really made a lot of things in Foundation make more sense. At least make more sense as I was reading through it the first time. So I do still need to get to the other prequel book, but I have read this one. How to even describe the Foundation trilogy or this book. So in this series, I have to remember his name. There's a man named Harry Seldon who creates this science called psychohistory. And it's a combination of psychology, history, and I want to say like mathematics or economics or something. There's another discipline that's part of it, but it's not in the name. But he comes up with this science that he can use to predict the future. And the prequel books, or at least Prelude to Foundation, covers him creating the science, figuring out how to make this work and all of that. And then in the Foundation trilogy, he's actually applying it because the Galactic Empire? Yes, the Galactic Empire is starting to collapse. And he can see what's coming because of psychohistory. And so he starts taking steps to try to preserve humanity and preserve humanity's knowledge despite this collapse. So that's as simple as I can describe this series. Okay, I'm not going to do the quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica. We're just going to start in chapter 1. Suppressing a small yawn, Cleon said, "Demerzel, have you by any chance ever heard of a man named Harry Seldon?" That's the first paragraph, but I'll do a second one since, it's one sentence. Cleon had been emperor for just over 10 years, and there were times at state occasions when, dressed in the necessary robes and regalia, he could manage to look stately. He did so, for instance, in the holograph of himself that stood in the niche in the wall behind him. It was placed so that it clearly dominated the other niches, holding the holographs of several of his ancestors. There you go. It is a futuristic world. I think it's set on a different planet too, so or maybe galaxy would be a better way to phrase that. All right, the next book that I got from Amazon is one that I've already started, and you've heard me talk about it, and that is The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. This is a Japanese classic. It was written in around 1000 AD, and it's a very chunky book. It's over 1100. My edition is over 1100 pages, and my particular edition is the Arthur Waley translation, which was the first full translation into English. I am enjoying it so far, but from what I gather, it's basically a book detailing, kind of slice of life, detailing the life of Genji, who is, I believe he's the second son to the emperor. So I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, because there's just, I've barely started and there's already a lot to this story. So, all right, the first chapter is called Kiritsubu. At the court of an emperor, he lived it matters not when. There was among the many gentlewomen of the wardrobe and chamber one who, though she was not of very high rank, was favored far beyond all the rest, so that the great ladies of the palace, each of whom had secretly hoped that she herself would be chosen, looked with scorn and hatred upon the upstart who had dispelled their dreams. Still less were her formal companions, the minor ladies of the wardrobe, content to see her raised so far above them. Thus her position at court, preponderant though it was, exposed her to constant jealousy and ill will, and soon, wore out with petty vexations, she fell into a decline, growing very melancholy and retiring frequently to her home. And I'm going to stop there because that is an extremely lengthy paragraph, and that was just shy of half of it. So it gives you at least an idea of the writing. All right, the next book I'm not going to read the first paragraph of because it's a nonfiction, and that is Fast, Feast, Repeat by Jen Stevens. This is a book on intermittent fasting, on its benefits and how to do it, what your options are, things along that line. I have already started this one. I got through part 1, but then it was due back to my library through my Libby app, and I didn't really want to go back on the wait list, so I bought my own copy. The next book is also a nonfiction, and that is Every Woman a Theologian by Felicia Masonheimer. I actually read this one last year. I think it was the Revived Christian Book Club's book for November, but I read it in December because I just didn't get to it in time to read it with them. But I did really enjoy this book, and in this book, Felicia talks about the different areas that you can study when it comes to God. So studying creation, studying end times, studying the Holy Spirit, studying salvation, etc. I really like this book, and it's a really good introduction to all of those areas if you want to have an idea of what to study in your Bible. And again, not going to read the first paragraph because it's a nonfiction. All right, and the next 3 books are all from the same author. I'm actually going to go ahead and mention a 4th one because it's not here yet, but I might as well talk about all of the author's books at once. So the author is Nadine Brandes, in case you're wondering. And the first book I got is Romanov. Then I got Fox. And I got Wistress. The one that's still not here is A Time to Die. Sorry. It's one of the books in the Out of Time trilogy, and I had to remember the right title. I have read the entire Out of Time trilogy, and I've read Fox by her, but I haven't read the other 2. However, when I made my short for the 54321 book tag and I was coming up with auto-buy authors, I realized Nadine Brandes feels like an auto-buy author. Every time I have seen that she's come out with a new book, I want to pick the book up. However, I have a tendency to delay on buying books from people, and I'm like, I've been wanting the rest of the Out of Time trilogy. I had the second and third books, and I was only able to get them from one bookseller, and they were slightly overpriced, but nobody else seemed to have them at the time. Now, other sellers seem to have them. They're on Amazon, they're on Barnes & Noble, so if you're interested in them, I would go check them out now, because I don't know if they're going to stay available on those sites, because they weren't about a year ago when I was buying the second and third books. So I did want to get the rest of her books. I've wanted to read Romanov for a while, I've wanted to read Wistress for a while, and now she has a new book coming out as well. So I decided to just get caught up on her books, And that way when she has a new book come out, it's only one book I have to buy instead of everything she's already published. So I now have a whole bunch of her books. Obviously, I don't have the Out of Time book. I may see if I can find a copy on Amazon where I can read from the first chapter, but I don't have it here with me to read from. So I'm going to start with Romanov, which is April 25th, 1918, Tobolsk, Russia. Also, other than the fact that this has to do with the Romanovs, I know nothing about this book. So, I watched my diaries burn. Pages curled in on themselves like spider legs accepting death. My past, my stories, turned to ash and tendrils of smoke. But I would not weep for them. The Bolsheviks could take far more precious things from me. I would not give them my tears. So that one sounds interesting. And then, like I said, Fox I have read, and this one is about the gunpowder plot, which, remember the 5th of November. Oh, what's his actual name? Guy Fawkes. All of a sudden it was like, Thomas Fox was all that was coming to mind, and that's the main character in the book. Guy Fawkes plotted to blow up Parliament on November 5th. I don't remember what year now. I'm blanking on which king it even was. But he plotted to blow up Parliament. It was part of the religious conflict between Protestants and Catholics at the time. And this story follows his fictionalized son because it's not known. I feel like when I looked it up, there were speculations that he might have had a son, but it's not known for sure whether he did or not. But this is an alternate history with a fantasy element. In this world, there is a color magic. Each person, when they get to a certain age, they get a mask and they find out which color they are able to control. So if they can control the color red, then anything that is red, they have power over it. So whether it be fire or a red shirt or whatever the case may be, I didn't mean to throw a Star Trek reference in there. Sorry, kind of just happened. But they have control over that. However, there are a group of people who are accessing white light, and the belief among a lot of people is you do not access white light. You can access the colors that come from white light. You do not access white light directly, which fits in really well with the religious tension that was going on at the time. I'll let you read the book to figure out how those really connect, but realizing that connection really heightened my enjoyment of this book. I was already enjoying it. That just made it even better. Okay, York, England, late spring 1604. Okay, now that I'm reading that, I want to say it was James the First, but I don't remember for sure if that was the king or not. I wasn't ready to turn to stone. I leaned so close to the small wall mirror that my nose left a grease spot on the glass, but I held still, or tried to. I couldn't control the trembling. The grease spot smeared. Yeah, I also forgot there's a plague going on in this book as well, which is what the stone's referring to. And then Wistress, I really know nothing about. I think the main character, oh, that's right, her tears, I think grant wishes, but her next tear will kill her, I think is kind of the story behind this one. Beyond that, I have no idea, and that might not even be correct. But I didn't cry until I was 12 years old. Muddy and Popji had caught the pox from me. I'd recovered a fortnight prior and was still weak, unable to fully walk normally again. Oma said the pox ate away some of my bone. That didn't stop me from sitting by their bedsides in agony day and night. So, I'm sorry that I don't know a lot about some of these books, but the Out of Time trilogy is a futuristic dystopian series in which people are given clocks at birth that tell them how long they have to live. Days, hours, minutes, seconds. But when the main character and her brother were born, there were 3 of them, but mothers are only given 2 clocks. And so one of the triplets died, their clock expired, and there was 1 clock left. But they don't know if it's, I think Parvati is the main character's name. They don't know if it's hers or her brother's clock. But one of them is going to die within the next year. according to the clock. They just don't know which one. And Parvati wants to do something that lets her be remembered before she dies. Like, she's convinced the clock is hers, her brother's convinced the clock is his. And there is a huge wall that goes down the west side of her town. The other side of the wall is outside of their country's jurisdiction. It's an untamed area. People are sent over there as punishment. But she ends up going across the wall in order to chronicle what's over there, what life is like, to try to survive, and hopefully have this story that makes a name for herself that lives beyond her clock. And I really enjoyed the series. So, like I said, I've been wanting to own the first book because I own the other two, and I finally bought it. There was once a time when only God knew the day you'd die. At least that's what they tell me. I wasn't alive then, back when life bore adventure and death held surprise. I guess God decided to share the coveted knowledge. Either that or we stole it from him. Personally, I think he just gave the world what it thought it wanted. Control. Okay, so then the rest of these books are from Barnes & Noble. The first one is a manga that unfortunately I haven't started, but it is Snow White with the Red Hair, Volume 3. And I have watched the anime for this show, but I haven't read the manga yet. I own the first 2 volumes. I was hoping to get volumes 3 and 4 because I'd like to at least get that far by the end of the year into the series. But they didn't have volume 4, so I only bought volume 3. And this series is about a girl who has bright red hair, and in her kingdom, the prince wants to make her part of his harem because of her hair. She doesn't want any part of that, so she ends up leaving, falls in with a group of people who take her back to their country, and then she finds out that one of them is a prince in his kingdom. She is an herbalist, and she starts working there, trying to work her way up, making friends, making a living, all of that. I really like the anime, so I'm hoping I enjoy the manga. The next one is a graphic novel that I was originally going to borrow through my library app, but then they stopped carrying the books. So I went ahead and bought it at Barnes & Noble, and that is 5 Worlds, The Sand Warrior by Mark and Alexis Siegel. I don't know much about this book either, except something has happened to the worlds, and in order to save them, there are mysterious beacons that have to be lit. And so these 3 kids set out to try to do that. Beyond that, I have no idea what happens in this series. Again, I don't know if there's any of this I can read because it's a graphic novel. Not really. Because it's either dialogue or it's descriptions of pictures, and I'm not trying to put the pictures on the screen. So, sorry, can't really read from that one. All right, the next 2 books are from series that I've already started. And the first one is The Forgotten Kingdom by Signe Pike. This is the second book in the Lost Queen trilogy, which I read the first book earlier this year and really enjoyed it. This one is a bit shorter than The Lost Queen. The Lost Queen I know is over 500 pages, and this one's around 450. But this is a story of Langorith and her brother Lilican, who lived in, I believe, the 6th century in Scotland. And Lilican is believed to be the inspiration for Merlin in Arthurian legend. I don't know exactly how Langorith fits into that, but I'm guessing either she, her husband, her children, somehow feature into the legend. I'm not sure yet. I'm sure I'll figure that out as I get further into the series. But like I said, I really enjoyed the first book, so I went ahead and bought the second one. And I don't know if this is going to be spoilery for the first book or not, so I don't know if I can read it or not, but we will see. And it doesn't look like the first paragraph spoils anything for the first book, so I'll go ahead and read it. It was the time of year when daylight stretched long. Travelers were often spied long into the lingering hours of dusk, yet on this day the moors still blazed hot beneath the sun when we stopped to make camp for the night. That's all we get from that one. And I have no idea because I don't... Maybe it does somewhat pick up from where the last book left off, but it doesn't give you any good information. All right, the next book is also from a series I've started, and that is Empire of Ivory by Naomi Novik. Sorry, my camera looks like it's off, but apparently it's not. I will shift over though. This is the 4th book in the Temeraire series, which is set during the Napoleonic Wars, but we have dragons and dragon riders. So I've really enjoyed the first 3 books in the series so far, hoping I enjoy the 4th one. And I can read the first paragraph from this one, but I will warn, no, I'm not going to say swear words, but there is one swear word in here, and this one does get a little bit violent and gory, so know that before I read it. Send up another, darn you. Send them all up, at once if you have to, Lawrence said savagely to poor Calloway, who did not deserve to be sworn at. The gunner was firing off the flares so quickly his hands were scorched black, skin cracking and peeling to bright red where some powder had spilled onto his fingers. He was not stopping to wipe them clean before setting each flare to the match. So, like I said, Napoleonic Wars. I think that clears that up. All right, the next one that I got is a middle grade nonfiction, and that is The Mona Lisa Vanishes by Nicholas Day. This was, if I remember correctly, the group pick for middle grade March this year, but unfortunately I wasn't able to get a hold of it from my library in March, and I kind of put off buying it because I was debating, do I want to buy it or not, but I finally broke down and bought it. So this book, like I said, it's nonfiction, but it tells about when the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre in Paris and how that theft made it as famous as it was, and I assume it goes into how the painting was found and returned. But if I understand correctly, it also talks about how the painting never should have existed, or potentially wouldn't have existed. So I'm curious. All right, chapter 1 is The Creation of the Mona Lisa. And I will do about 3 or 4 paragraphs because they're all 1 sentence each. Imagine a palazzo, a magnificent Renaissance building. It's Florence, 1503. There are a lot of palazzos around. Choose a good one. Now imagine a man, handsome, charming, gentle. Make him a painter. Imagine a woman, intriguing, unknown, beautiful. Make her a model. Do you see them? Neither of them should be there. So, like I said, it sounds interesting. All right, and the last 2 books are ones that I pre-ordered but still haven't gotten to yet. The first one is The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan, which is the first book in the Last Legacy series. I don't know why I've been drawn to this series or this book, but I really feel like I want to pick this up. I've heard it said it's for fans of Nicholas Eames and Joe Abercrombie, which Nicholas Eames I'm not familiar with. Joe Abercrombie, from what I understand, tends to write grimdark, and I don't know that that's really going to be my thing, but I don't know, something about this intrigues me. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about it. The only thing I know is I'm pretty sure the main character's father is killed, and he sets out to try to find out who killed his father and why, but he ends up in a place where it says something like, truth it has the highest price of all. So, I don't know. I really don't know much about this book, but I'm curious. Chapter 1 is entitled The Lady of Last Chances. And this is another long paragraph, so I'm going to take a drink before I read this, because my throat is getting so dry. The tavern was called the Pathfinder's Gambit, though its patrons referred to it as the Armpit, or simply just the Pit, on account of its stale odor and the fact that its interior rarely saw sunlight. The Pit had a particular reputation for violence, and tonight had proven no exception. The evening's current tally stood at 3 assaults, 2 stabbings and an attempted strangulation, 2 brawls, and, so far at least, just 1 death. Still, the night was young, the drink was flowing, and half the card games taking place in the tavern's smoke-filled common room were rigged. It was only a matter of time before someone else took a blade between the ribs. So yeah, that sounds kind of grimdark to me, so we'll see how that one ends up going. So the last book that I bought, you may have seen in my July TBR video, but that is The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton, who also wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This book, from what I understand, is about a group of people who live on an island, and there is a fog in this world that kills anyone it touches, but a group of scientists have figured out how to keep the fog at bay and keep the island safe. However, one morning the people wake up and discover one of the scientists is dead, and they now have 107 hours to solve the murder before the fog rolls in and kills everyone on the island. The only problem is, no one can remember what happened the night before, so someone on the island is a murderer and they don't even know it. As I said in my TBR video, this sounds like it could be really good, but I've only heard okay things about it so far, so we'll see. We'll see what I think of it. Okay, I'm not reading the prologue. I am going to read chapter 1. The rowboats float at world's end, a rope pulled taut between them. There are 3 children in each with exercise books and pencils, listening to Niema deliver her lesson. Not much to go off of on that one. All right, so those are all of the books that I bought in the months of April, May, and June this year. I suppose I should talk about how my book buying has gone, but I really don't want to. So at the beginning of the year, I made a goal to only buy 50 books or less by the end of the year. That was my acceptable goal. My ideal goal was less than 30. However, at this point, I can say I did not make my ideal goal. I have no idea how many books are here, but I know I've bought more than 30 this year. So I did write out the numbers. I'll have to read them off my computer, but it's not looking pretty. I forgot. I also had another goal to try to get my physical TBR to under 100 books. That's also not going to happen. So yeah, my physical TBR started at 165 books at the beginning of the year. Currently, I have read 15 books on my TBR. I've DNF'd 2. I've unhauled at least 6. Honestly, if you do the math on these numbers, they don't add up. So I don't know if I've unhauled more books than I remember or where the numbers got off. But currently, I have bought 30 books that I have not read. That doesn't include the books I've bought that I have read. That's just 30 books that I have not read. Oh, and I was gifted 6 books that I haven't read. My current total, according to my Excel spreadsheet, is 169 books that I still need to read. And that's me listing out every individual book that I own, which I've kept this going for years. This isn't something new. But listing out every book I own and marking which ones I've read, which ones I've had, which ones I haven't, and counting up the ones I haven't and adding them to the total. So it comes out to 169 books. But if you add up all the books that I read, unhauled, DNF'd, etc., and bought, it doesn't come out to 169. So I don't know where I'm off, but I am off somewhere. And again, I've bought 30 books that I haven't read, and this is just bought that I haven't read. This is not received. I am not counting books that I get from other people. I want to say I've probably bought at least 5 books that I have read. So it's not going well. And that is fiction books. Nonfiction wise, I started with 15. I've read 2. I haven't DNF'd any. I unhauled 6 and I bought 8. So I'm still at 15. So that number hasn't changed. But I'm only at 15. So I'm not that worried about how many nonfiction books I own that I haven't read compared to fiction books. Okay, I think that's all I have for you guys today. And I hope so because my throat is getting dry. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of the books that I've talked about today, let me know what you thought about them down in the comments. Also, let me know, other than the ones I'm already planning to get to in July, let me know if there's any that you would especially like to see me get to soon. As always, I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.